Okay, we will go ahead and get started with our presentation today. We're really excited to have you join us. I am Scott Mastley. I'm the CHRO of Thread, and thrilled to see some of our HR clients attending the session today on Georgia Retraining and Georgia Jobs tax credits. I have a few announcements in the beginning, and then we will get started. Everyone who is attending is on mute, and that is just so we can cover the content. We want to make sure that we get to everything that you want to hear about and learn about today. And we are psyched to have an expert with us on the call, one of our tax credit partners. And following this presentation today, you will get a follow-up email with a bunch of resources that will be of interest to you, that will explain some of the details of the things that Brian is going to talk about today, as well as his contact information. And we definitely encourage you that if you have an interest in this, questions about it, or think you might qualify, reach out to Brian, and he'd be glad to do a discovery with you, as he does with our other clients, and sometimes finds thousands and thousands of dollars for them. So nothing wrong with that. It's worth a try. So we'll go ahead and get started. Want to introduce Brian Wages, who is with the Specialty Tax Group. He is the Credits and Incentive Specialist with Specialty Tax Group. Tax credits are something that a lot of us get confused about, and sometimes we wonder if this is relevant to us or not. And we partner with Specialty Tax Group to work with our clients. They do a great job, and Brian is going to explain a lot of things about that today. He has prior experience with big firms such as Deloitte and their tax credit departments. He is only the 39th person in America to get the Certified Credits and Incentives Professional Designation certification. So he knows what he's talking about. We got the right person for the job. He has been in the industry since 2011, so he's seen what's happening out there, and he can provide good feedback for y'all. And he's going to focus on some of the biggies that might be most relevant to you today, like Georgia Retraining, jobs and investment tax credits. And what's most important about Brian, he is also a UGA grad like me, so go Dogs. And I will let Brian take off. I'm going to monitor the chat. So if you have any questions or comments at all, just type them right in the chat, and I will see those, and we can address them as we go through this session. So Brian, here we go.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate the introduction. I think it's very fitting that one Georgia Bulldog introduces another when we're talking about Georgia tax credits. So Georgia overall as a state has been ranked #1 in the country for businesses for 10 straight years. So, this is something that I track. I follow the Georgia Department of Economic Development. Always read their posts, their articles, and one of the latest, within the last couple months, this article was posted about a decade of business excellence. Georgia ranked #1 for businesses for 10 straight years. And one of the reasons for that, there's a number of reasons for it, but one of the reasons for it is the pro-business, the business-friendly statutory tax credit. So by statutory, I mean if a company is doing a certain activity, they are entitled to a tax credit. So it's not something they're chosen for. It is something they get as of right. So for example, the programs we're talking about today, if a company is adding jobs, in a certain amount of jobs in certain areas or in a certain industry, they can qualify for a credit. Or if they are training their employees on new or upgraded software, equipment, or technology, they can get a credit, and they're entitled to that credit by law. It's in the tax law, in the tax code. And that's something I always like to point out, because sometimes our clients have the thought, oh, this is too good to be true. How am I getting this money by doing activities that I was already planning on doing? So, and it's because these programs are written into the tax law, and they've been in the tax law for a number of years, even decades. So the first program we're going to talk about, this one is very near and dear to my heart. It's the Georgia Retraining Tax Credit. I started my career working on this credit almost exclusively. And it's such a great program. And the tax law states that companies that train their employees on newly implemented or upgraded or said otherwise, new releases or updates to their software or technology. So, one example of technology is phone apps, and that can be, anything from messaging or, scheduling or clocking in and out, those types of technology, or even new equipment can claim the Georgia retraining tax credit. The requirement is that the company must file a Georgia income tax return because the credit offsets 50% of their corporate income tax liability. So if your company doesn't have a Georgia income tax liability and you don't foresee it having one in the future, maybe this isn't a good option for you. But if you don't have an Georgia income tax liability this year, but you think you will in the future, the credit can be carried forward up to 10 years. So it still could potentially be an option for you. So those are the companies that qualify. Any industry can qualify for it. Some industries are better than others. And we'll talk about that a little bit more on coming slides. But in order to qualify on the employee level, so for an employee to qualify as a trainee and be eligible to get up to $1,250 per year, they must be a Georgia resident. They must be a first line employee or immediate supervisor. So, your C-suite, generally someone with the title of vice president, probably not going to qualify. We can take a look at the org chart and double check those titles. But they must be a first line employee or immediate supervisor. They must work 16 weeks prior to the training. So that's something that, and all of these items are something that we're going to verify on our end. So, and then the last requirement is must work 25 hours per week, which that is in order to be considered a full-time employee, which that is a very low threshold to be considered full-time. So it's another way this is a favorable credit for businesses. But these 4 items, like I mentioned, this is something we're going to verify through a payroll report and potentially an org chart. So we'll ask for that information. Once you decide to move forward, and this could be a great option for you for your tax savings, we'll request that employee report. Actually, one of the reasons that we partner alongside of Thread is to make sure, or that ensures this process, the data gathering process, is as easy and smooth as possible. That's some information that they can provide. But we'll ask for their state of residence, their title, when was their hire date, and term date if applicable, and then how many hours did they work on the year. So we'll get all that information. We'll be able to analyze that information and determine who qualifies and who doesn't. So I guess my advice on that is to send everybody that worked during the year, whether they're there still or not, and then just leave it up to us to take out the ones that don't qualify.
Brian, I got a question.
Yeah.
Regarding the 16 weeks, they need to work 16 weeks before the training counts towards that specific credit. So new hires, like training they do in onboarding, would not qualify for that. What about if they did refresher training on their original training after 4 months? That counts?
Absolutely. The joke is, put that employee in the corner for 16 weeks before you teach them anything, and then, start the training at that point. It just has to be, that onboarding is what it's trying to take out. They call it the retraining, not the initial training credit. So that's right. The onboarding training is typically what we have to remove from the calculation. So the calculation of the credit, I mentioned it's up to $1,250 per employee per year. But the way it's calculated, it's half of the direct cost of the training. So that typically is their hourly rate times the number of hours that they train on these different programs. But there's other types of costs that we can include in the calculation. So, for example, if it's a manager training someone on their team, we can actually count the time for the trainer and the trainee. So that's a really helpful way to maximize the credit, is to have your team members train each other on these new or upgraded software, equipment, or technology. More costs that can be included. So travel for training, maybe, for example, say you have Salesforce for your CRM, you ship a couple of team members out. They have a big, conference out I think in California every year. The Foo Fighters are performing, it's a big expense to you. You're actually able to recoup that 50% of that cost back through this credit. And our advice is always to have those people that travel for the training come back and share what they learned with the team. So that can be included. The flight, the hotel, the rental car, the gas, and even the meals can be included. We just need to have proof of those costs through receipts. And then the last type of costs that can be included is, say your company spends money on establishing or upgrading a training room. So like the technology, the projector, the sound system can all be included in the year that the investment was made. Then also external training. So the cost of the instructors, say you do have a vendor come in and train your team on newer upgraded software, equipment, or technology. A lot of the time that cost is lumped in with the implementation cost. But a simple email from that vendor saying the value of the training, it was XYZ, or sometimes we find it more successful to ask, if we were to purchase additional training for the same amount of time, how much would that cost us? So that allows us to break out the cost of the vendor-led training, because we cannot include the total implementation cost, just the portion that was for training. So all of those costs lumped together, and then by employee, 50% of that $2,500 will get you to $1,250 per employee if they're able to hit the max. So as you can tell, I'm pretty fired up about this credit, and a lot of that is because I've been doing it for 13 years. But there's a lot of great things about this credit. Any industry qualifies for it. So a lot of credits are put in the tax code specifically for a manufacturer, warehouse and distribution, R&D industry clients. But this retraining credit, any industry can qualify, as long as that learning took place and the employees meet those qualifications we discussed. Any industry qualifies. So what I typically say is, if your team members spend a lot of time on the computer, dealing with equipment or other types of technology, you should at least take a look at this credit every year, assuming that you have, at least, typically we say 15 employees. Any number of employees under than that, it's just going to be, probably not worth your time to move forward. But, at least 15 employees should take a look at this credit. So another item I like to point out, so many companies are using software where the updates are pushed out through the cloud on a quarterly, monthly, or even weekly basis. So the constant upgrades for the software system these days means there's always those new features that your team members are having to learn. Another good point about this credit, and probably my favorite one, is This is reviewed, the project is reviewed by the state of Georgia prior to going on your tax return. So our clients tend to love this point about the credit because there's no worry about the credit being clawed back or 3 years down the line taken away from you. It's signed off by the state when we submit it, prior to us delivering it to you and your CPA, and prior to us billing you anything. We make sure that the state approves it. We have a really great relationship with the approver of this credit. One individual approves all the credits for the state of Georgia. We've known her for about 7 to 8 years. She trusts our work. The website says it takes 30 days for the review to take place, but she typically turns ours around within 24 to 48 hours just because of the familiarity she has with our work and the trust that it's going to be done correctly. The longevity of this credit has been around since 94. A lot of other tax credits have come and gone since then, but this one, we're approaching 30 years. So I don't see it going away anytime soon. And companies can claim it every single year, as long as that qualified learning takes place. So what we always do is we set up processes, provide templates so our clients can track their training as it happens, and so that they're better prepared to provide that data that we need to calculate and claim the credit on their behalf. So that most of our clients that get this credit in, for example, tax year 2023, they're doing it for 2024 and ongoing. As long as they're able to use that credit, they want to continue to do it. I mentioned it before, but our partnership with Thread for the payroll piece, that just really eliminates half of the data that we need in order to calculate the credit. We always ask for two sets of data. One is payroll information and one is the details of the training. So like the training program information. Well, since we partner with Thread, you're only having to provide the training details of the learning that took place during the year.
Brian, we got a couple questions. Can I jump in?
Okay. Yeah.
One question was, are you referring to the Georgia Technical College?
Yes. So the way it used to be approved, depending on the location of the business, you would have to, and we took binders, so printed out documentation, 3-ring binders, took it to technical colleges all over the state, and had them review it in person. They'd flip through the 3-ring binder and sign off on it with a pen. Well, thank goodness technology has advanced since then. Everything is submitted online to that one individual. She provides a folder. We upload those files. She signs off on it, emails the signed forms, has greatly led to big efficiencies in the process.
Okay, thank you. And then another question, just do you have an example or two of total dollars we're talking about, like, for companies that you've worked with?
Yeah, so one of our bigger success stories, we were working with a alcohol distributor in Georgia. They had done the credit maybe 5 to 7 years back, but the first couple of times we spoke to the CFO, they said, we don't think we qualify, or the credit's just not going to be worth our time to move forward. Well, after many discussions, and pointing out our fees are success-based, meaning if we don't find a credit, then you don't owe any fee. They decided to move forward for 2022, going back and amending a year to claim the credit. And we were able to find them, and they had 500 to 600 employees. So it was a rather large company. We were able to find them $400,000 in 2022, and then another $500,000 in 2023. So their response of, we don't think we qualify, or this isn't worth our time, they've now become one of our biggest advocates. And they tell everyone they come across that you should look into this. Now, that what those credit amounts wouldn't be possible if your company doesn't have that number of Georgia employees, because there is that cap. But it just goes to show, you should take a look at this if you have that minimum threshold number of employees.
Appreciate it.
So that was a great question that tied into this next slide. I don't qualify for the Georgia retraining credit. Well, let's find out. Typically, unless you're in an industry where it's all manual labor, then I think, and you have a Georgia income tax liability, and at least 15 employees, you should take a look at this credit. We'll do a free scoping and analysis of if your eligibility, and even provide a credit range estimate. The retraining tax credit requires too much documentation. So it does require a lot of documentation. So that is some pushback that we've received. The thing is, with our experience doing this since 2011, we've been able to establish some templates and also some processes that ease the burden of the data collection. We're very hands-on with that data collection process because we don't want it to be a roadblock. Our team scours the internet for some of the information on the different pieces of software, equipment, or technology to take that load of providing user guides or release notes of the equipment or software. We help recreate attendance sheets and tasks like that helps with our efficiency, makes that requirement of the documentation, lowers that burden significantly. Retraining puts me at risk for an audit. I mentioned already the state reviews and approves it before it goes on your tax return. One we hear a lot, oh, my accountant will either take care of this for me, or my accountant has not mentioned this to me. Well, what we do is a very specialized piece of tax. So, we know this part of the tax code very well. Your accountant, we actually partner with a number of accountants. So a lot of accountants send us their clients for us to perform this part of their tax savings for them. But I don't know, unless you're talking about a big four firm perhaps, but there's not that many accountants that want to take on this type of work. They partner with firms like STG. And then the last excuse or misconception we hear, I don't have time to gather the data. A couple of points I already mentioned will help you through that process. We know the questions to ask to get the answers. We'll even schedule a working meeting. We'll come out to, if you're local, we'll come out to your office and have that meeting with you to help gather that data. And also the first year will be the most time consuming because you're getting used to it. But year after year, it gets easier and easier. The process. You can plan ahead. The burden of gathering the data becomes less and less. And our goal is to not let that be a roadblock.
Yeah, I can testify. Thread has gone through this process, especially tax group and with Brian, and I didn't think it was that big a deal in terms of the burden on the employer and information gathering. We went back and looked by, who was trained and how often and how much did we spend on their training. Like, we send our employees to the iSolve Connect conference to make sure they're updated on all that every year and things like that qualifies, was great. So I didn't think it was that bad. We have another question, Brian. Can the training for warehouse management software qualify with warehouse labor?
Yes, that's a perfect example. Absolutely.
Great.
So some of the best practices, I've mentioned a few of these. Understand that doesn't matter how the training occurs, vendor-led, peer-to-peer, even on-the-job self-learning qualifies. Have management team train, because like I mentioned, you can get credit for the trainee and the trainer. Track your learning as it happens. Leverage your other management teams or your IT head or your technology team to help with that tracking of the training, and then keep those receipts for any traveling that occurred. All right, so that is the Georgia Retraining Tax Credit. I wanted to start there. We have one other program that we're going to talk about briefly, because I know we're coming up on the time, but the Georgia Jobs Tax Credit. So how to qualify for this program. The idea of this program is to incentivize companies within certain industries or within certain economically distressed areas to create jobs, to add jobs within Georgia. That's the adding jobs is so important for just how the state is viewed, the local area is viewed. So in Georgia, this program starts at 2 full-time employees. So if your company is in a certain economically distressed area, you can only add 2 jobs year over year and still qualify for this credit. So if you're expanding, relocating, even organic growth can qualify for the jobs credit. But Georgia calls the preferred industries, or the industries that qualify, business enterprises. So, for example, manufacturing, warehouse and distribution, logistics, software development, telecommunications, research and development, processing. So processing is a little bit vague. That's something where you're not sure if you qualify as a processing industry. Reach out to us. We can get your NAICS code and test out and make sure that you qualify. This is not an and, this is an or. You either need to be in one of those industries according to your NAICS code, or located in a certain area. So if you are in a opportunity zone or military zone, military zone being near a military base, or a tier 1 bottom 40 county. So let me explain what a tier 1 bottom 40 county is. Each year, the state of Georgia, the Department of Community Affairs, ranks the counties in Georgia, all 159 of them, into tiers based on how economically distressed they are. So the unemployment level, residents, the percentage of residents that live below the poverty line, those are the type of data points that they look at, with tier 1 being the most economically distressed, going down to tier 4. I can tell you, if you're located near Metro Atlanta, the closest tier 1 bottom 40 county is Clayton County. Also, for certain years, 2022 and 24, Clark County is within those bottom 40 counties as well. But that's another data point that we can look up very quickly. Just getting the address, we can determine is this location in a special zone, or is it in one of those tier 1 bottom 40 counties.
Brian, so would a child care center possibly qualify?
Not depending on what getting the NAICS code to be sure, but off the top of my head, it would not qualify for this credit.
Okay, but what about the retraining?
Yes.
Okay.
It would.
Okay.
So how to calculate the jobs credit? I love this table here at the bottom of this slide. It breaks it out. Tier 1, $4,000 per job. Only have to add 2 jobs. On the right-hand side, military zone, opportunity zone, $3,500 per job. Only have to add 2 jobs, and then it scales down from there. But so that $4,000 for tier 1 or those special zones, that's for 5 years, as long as those jobs are maintained. So you're talking about $20,000 per job over a span of 5 years. The credit can be very significant. And I've seen, the state of Georgia using this credit to lure some very large, companies to the state. For example, if you're going out I-16 towards Savannah, Hyundai is putting a massive electric vehicle manufacturing facility. Guarantee you they're taking advantage of this credit. And with hundreds of new employees, that credit is going to be huge. Another good thing about this credit is there are special benefits of the credit can be applied to payroll withholding for companies within a opportunity zone, military zone, or located within a tier 1 county. So maybe you say, I'd love to pursue the retraining credit or the jobs credit, but I don't have a Georgia income tax liability. Well, if you're in one of these special zones or a tier 1 county, you can claim this credit against payroll withholding. So you could still be eligible for this credit despite the fact that you don't have a Georgia income tax liability. There are a
Right.
couple of, yeah,
Sorry, there was a question, says, so any business qualifies in tier 1, the bottom county?
tier 1 bottom 40 county, any company qualifies as long as you're adding at least 2 jobs.
Okay.
Yes. So those 2 bonuses that I wanted to mention that make this credit even better. If there's importing and exporting out of one of the Georgia ports, typically we see that either in Savannah or Brunswick. There are a few other ports, but those are the main ones. Then there could be an additional $1,250 per job. So if it was a tier 1 plus they got the port bonus, you're looking at $5,250 per job. There's also a PPE manufacturer bonus. This one, is starting to phase out with, the further we get from COVID. But there are 2 different bonuses that can make this credit even better. And that's all I have on those 2 credits. Those are the 2 that, based on our partnership with Thread, that make the most sense. These are the ones that we've worked on the most within our Georgia clients and have seen the most potential for tax savings. We're happy to go to the next step of taking a look, scoping the opportunity for your company, seeing if you qualify for either one of those 2 programs. I think we're going to be sending out some information afterwards. But here is my contact information if you want to reach out. And so we can take a look and see if you qualify for either one of those programs.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. There's a lot of good info and a great way for companies to take advantage of legit tax credits that have been around a long time and that are approved by the state, and a good way to limit your tax liability a little bit in that way. So if you have any other questions, we'll stay on for a few more seconds. Feel free to chat in. Anything you want to ask is totally fine. If not, feel free to follow up with Brian directly. Everybody's going to get a copy of this slide deck. So you will have this slide with Brian's contact information as well as the other slides if you want to share with your team, talk about that, and then follow up with Brian directly. He will be glad to do some discovery with you and see if you qualify. It's as easy as a couple emails or a phone call and a little information gathering on your NAICS codes and locations and industry, stuff like that. And then he can tell you if it's worth your time to get together and take it to the next step and go from there. Looks like we have a new question. Oh, it just says, thank you. Very helpful. Thank you. Great. I appreciate it. And if anyone on the meeting today is not an HR client of Thread, we sell software and services. So the software is our iSolved awesome payroll software that has everything from applicant tracking, performance management, time, payroll, benefits, ACA, everything else is built into it, as well as a learning management system. And then we sell a HR consulting as well as a support service for anyone wearing the HR hat. So if that's you, feel free to reach out to me and I would love to talk to you about how we can help. And I see we have one final question here. Does Microsoft Word, Excel, and PowerPoint training, is that eligible for retraining credits?
That's a really good question. No, so there's a language in the tax code, mass-produced software. So those are literally the exact examples I use for not qualifying, along with something like Gmail wouldn't qualify. But that's basically it. Maybe a handful of others. If it's really mass produced, something like I don't like to include Zoom, but those are really the only ones that wouldn't qualify.
Okay. I'm just adding that into the chat here for the record. Thank you. So exciting. We're operating warehouses in Clayton, and tax credits are in our future. Woohoo! All right. Well, feel free to reach out directly to Brian, and he'll be glad to get it started. I appreciate everybody jumping on today. And thank you for partnering with Thread and Specialty Tax Group. We appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thanks.